Vasudevaya. We'll be reading from Canto 3, Chapter 32, verse 10. In Canto 3, Chapter 32, verse 10. Evam paritya bhagavantam anupravishta ye yogino jitamarun manaso virahaga tanaiva sakam amritam purusham puranam Brahma pradhanam upayanti akatabhimanaha. Word for word. Evam thus. Paritya, having gone a long distance. Bhagavatam, Bhagavantam, Lord Brahma. Anupravishta, entered. Ye, those who. Yogina, yogis. Jita, controlled. Marut, the breathing. Manasa, the mind. Viraga, detached. Tena, with Lord Brahma. Eva, indeed. Sakam, together. Amritam, the embodiment of bliss. Purusham, unto the personality of Godhead. Puranam, the oldest. Brahma Pradhanam, the supreme Brahman. Upayanti, they go. Agata, not gone. Abhimana, whose false ego. Translation. The yogis who become detached from the material world by practice of breathing exercises and control of the mind reach the planet of Brahma, which is far, far away. After giving up their bodies, they enter into the body of Lord Brahma, and therefore when Brahma is liberated and goes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Supreme Brahman, such yogis can also enter into the kingdom of God. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. By perfecting their yogic practice, yogis can reach the highest planet, Brahmaloka or Satyaloka, and after giving up their material bodies, they can enter into the body of Lord Brahma. Because they are not directly devotees of the Lord, they cannot get liberation directly. They have to wait until Brahma is liberated, and only then, along with Brahma, they are also liberated. It is clear that as long as a living entity is a worshipper of a particular demigod, his consciousness is absorbed in thoughts of that demigod, and therefore he cannot get direct liberation or entrance into the kingdom of God. Nor can he merge into the impersonal effulgence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such yogis or demigod worshippers are subjected to the chance of taking birth again when there is again creation. Next verse, I'll read. Therefore, my dear mother, by devotional service, take direct shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. One can attain direct contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in full Krishna consciousness and revive one's eternal relationship with Him as lover, as Supreme Soul, as son, as friend, or as master. One can reestablish the transcendental loving relationship with the Supreme Lord in so many ways, and that feeling is true oneness. The oneness of the Mayavadi philosophers and the oneness of Vaishnava philosophers are different. The Mayavadi and Vaishnava philosophers both want to merge into the Supreme. But the Vaishnavas do not lose their identities. They want to keep their identity of lover, parent, friend, or servant. In the transcendental world, the servant and master are one. That is the absolute platform. Although the relationship is servant and master, both the servant and served stand on the same platform. That is oneness. Lord Kapila advised his mother that she did not need any indirect process. She was already situated in the direct process because the Supreme Lord had taken birth as her son. Actually, She did not need any further instruction because she was already in the perfectional stage. Kapila Dev advised her to continue in the same way. He therefore addressed his mother as Bhamini to indicate that she was already thinking of the Lord as her son. Devahuti is advised by Lord Kapila to take directly to devotional service, Krishna consciousness, because without that consciousness, one cannot become liberated from the clutches of Maya. Okay. So, for everyone's context, this chapter is called Entanglement in Fruitive Activities. Um, and this conversation is happening between uh, Lord Kapila and his mother, Mother Devahuti. She's been asking a series of questions, and Lord Kapila, who is his son, who's her son, sorry, is addressing some of these questions. Now, in the verse before, we read um, that if you even if you aspire, or if you're like if you pray to Lord Brahma, for example, and you're practicing breathing exercises to reach the planet of Lord Brahma, then you enter into the body of Lord Brahma afterwards. And then when Lord Brahma is liberated, then only do you go to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so Srila Prabhupada is making a point in the purport um, that, kind of synonymous to what you think of at the time of death. So if you're praying to a demigod, you will go to them. And Srila Prabhupada is making the point that that is more of an indirect way versus, approaching Lord Krishna directly. This is a different point than serving the devotee of the Lord. Those are two very different moods and points that are there. And then in the next verse, um, Lord Kapila is saying that, by devotional service, you can take direct shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and follow that path of direct devotional service. So that's the theme I wanted to maybe to cover or mention a few things about is what like practicing direct devotional service. What does that mean when we say that? And we've heard, I think, different uh, interpretations and meanings. So I just figured I could share a few examples from what I've heard. In As Lord Kapila goes on to talk about, and even what he's talked about in the past in this chapter, he there's sort of three big things he tries to emphasize. One is, what does devotional service mean? That's one aspect. The second aspect is practicing devotional service in the association of others. That's a very emphasized point. Practicing devotional service in the association of others. And the third part that Lord Kapila talks about is just hearing about it, hearing the glories of devotional service. So those are the three things that Lord Kapila in this specific canto or chapter ends up addressing these 3 points. Um, Now, there's sort of one paradox, which is that devotional service, when we say what is devotional service, it's supposed to be pure, right? It's supposed to be unmixed, so to speak. And so the question often comes up, but what if a human's consciousness is mixed? Like you have other ideas, you have your incentives, and your end goal might be different. So what if your consciousness is mixed? And the answer to that is always that, you know, devotional service is still practicable. It doesn't mean that your mind has to reach a certain stage for you to practice devotional service. So even with a mixed mind, it's still possible to practice devotional service. But devotional service itself is supposed to be, pure. But our consciousness might be mixed. So the process of practicing bhakti is to make our consciousness pure, so we can practice this aspect of pure devotional service. The thing that affects this mixed consciousness is the mind, and the mind gets affected by the modes of the material nature. They influence us to have different conceptions of life. Um, for example, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur makes this very strong statement. In this world, there's no love. He makes that statement. Now, of course, the argument might come up, no, I love my kids, I love my family, I love uh, these other folks. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that yes, that is the case, but there's always some difference of interest or some conflict of interest, like between a relationship, right, that is formed in love in this world. There's some, like, it may not be the exact same level, and that creates this conflict of interest, for example. So that's an example of where our conception is influenced by the modes of material nature. Our intention might be that we want to give this pure love, but in reality, we're getting influenced by the modes of material nature, and that's why our consciousness becomes mixed. That's just a very simple example to give. Um, and so this process of bhakti to make consciousness pure is the idea of eradicating these separate interests that everyone, all of us have, um, and to be able to cope with our karma. So we're not bound by these constraints, right? That is the whole process of bhakti. And then, uh, th- then the only when you can sort of practice that level is when you can become a sadhu and become really attached to this truth. Um, and the second point of that Lord Kapila makes in this chapter is the importance of association. Um, whenever there's sadhu sangha, any sort of sadhu sangha, there's purification, and the best thing to do is to take it. There's a point that Lord Kapila makes in chapter 25 of Canto 3. He says, thus consciously engaged in devotional service in the association of devotees, a person gains distaste for sense gratification, both in this world and in the next, by constantly thinking about the activities of the Lord. This process of Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of mystic power. When one is actually situated on that path of devotional service, he's able to control the mind. And then the Prabhupada talks about that a devotee in the association of devotees prefers to contemplate the activities of the Lord. Like when you're naturally together with devotees, there there's more of a preference to just contemplate the ideas of Krishna consciousness. And so that's the second aspect that Lord Kapila is stressing quite a bit. And then he breaks down, you know, when we say practicing bhakti, like what is that first and second stage, right? So the first stage is we're practicing devotional service with our current senses and under the regulations of the scriptures, like sadhana bhakti. So we're practicing with our mixed with our conceptions, but we're reading the scriptures to guide us or taking association of the right folks. And the second stage is then you sort of attain this sincere attachment for serving the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. Like it's like a sincere and um, as they say, it's raga bhakti. So the devotee automatically takes to the various services of the Lord just out of sincere attachment and the want to do it. So that's how, at a high level, he breaks these two stages down. And so he says, by practicing sadhana bhakti, one may gradually rise to the point of raga bhakti. Um, and realizing that pure devotional service is sudurlabha, it's extremely rare to achieve it, uh, is also important to just realize and understand. Like it's uh, it's hard to attain. in some ways. And again, in Canto 11, much later, it's said that after many many births and deaths, one achieves the rare human form of life, which, although temporary, affords one the opportunity to attain the highest perfection. Meaning, this human form of life that we all have, we get after many many births and deaths that we are able to get this. And so Krishna says, sober human beings should quickly endeavor for that ultimate perfection of life, as long as we have an actual human form body. Um, because sense gratification is available in any form of life, even in the most abominable species of life. But Krishna consciousness is only possible for a human being. So this is why the point is made that pure devotion service is Sudharlava, extremely rare to um, to achieve it. Um, and the third point that Lord Kapila makes is the importance of hearing, just hearing about Krishna. Like, there's so many benefits that we derive just from hearing about the Lord. And so there's various examples that are given throughout the Bhagavatam where, um, we hear, for example, whenever, if you chant the Nrsimha Kavach, you can attain ultimate freedom. Um, at the end of the prayers of Gajendra, it's mentioned that if someone chants early in the morning, they become purified, and they reach the same destination as Gajendra, and that invokes this culture of observing the great devotees on priority. And so and even at the end of the prayers, it says if anyone hears about the pastime of Gajendra, it instantly uh, purifies their mind. Same thing with when the Putana pastime when happens. Putana gets delivered by Lord Krishna. She gets liberated, and it's said that when that Sukadeva Goswami says that anyone who hears about Putana, this marvelous pastime, they attain love at the feet of Krishna. Um, and Putana's pastime also, shows that someone comes with poison, Krishna takes that poison away and gives him the nectar instead. And so if we have our mind is polluted or mixed, if we approach Krishna, with that, Krishna will ideally take that poison away and give us the nectar. And then the other part that, again, this theme of hearing, Lord Krishna says is that when we hear about pure devotees of the Lord, uh, you know, Krishna is there in that assembly listening when a pure devotee is being glorified. So again, being in the association of devotees and just hearing about the Krishna's devotees makes Krishna become present. I think I've shared this pastime in classes before, and I'll share it again. And you all might have heard this. There's this famous Lord Shiva temple in South India that I think it's called Kutiyor. It's only open for 10 days. Um, and devotees, make a rush to get darshan and for those 10 days that it's open. And so there's this, famous devotee by the name of Pundanam, who was a devotee of Krishna. And the local devotees of that temple arranged for Pundanam to narrate Srimad Bhagavatam in that temple of Lord Shiva. And so Pundanam would narrate Bhagavatam, and he would get to the part of reading Rukmini's letter to Krishna, Mother Rukmini's letter to Krishna, and then after that he would put a bookmark in the Bhagavatam to come back and read it from the next section the next day. And but when he would come back the next day, he would see that the bookmark is at the beginning of the section of Rukmini's section instead of the end. But he doesn't remember that entirely precisely because he's given so many classes. So he reads the same chapter, and he reads that same chapter for all 10 days. And the audience is thinking, why is he repeating the same thing over and over again? But in Pundanam's mind, he thinks, oh, he's reading this for the very first time because the Bhagavatam is so fresh for him. And on the last day, he by mistake takes the Bhagavatam with him as he's leaving the temple, but he forgets something, so he goes back to the temple. Oh, sorry, I take that back. He forgets to take the Bhagavatam with him, um, and but he leaves it in the temple, so he goes back to the temple to get it, and through the keyhole of the temple, he sees the Lord Shiva is narrating the pastime of Rukmini to Mother Parvati. And Mother Parvati says, "Can you please repeat what you just said about Rukmini's pastime?" And Parvati says to Lord Shiva that it's not as tasteful as hearing about Rukmini as Pundanam was narrating it. And so Lord Shiva then would place the bookmark at the beginning of the chapter, so Pundanam would narrate it, and Mother Parvati would hear that pastime directly from his mouth. And so this is all to say that even hearing the same glories of Krishna are powerful. And even someone like Mother Parvati or Lord Shiva appreciate hearing the glories of Krishna and his devotees over and over again. And that's the third aspect that Lord Kapila is stressing. Um, and then yeah, so that's the other example. And then also we hear in the whole Vritrasura pastime, like the characteristics of pure devotional service. And again, at the end of that pastime, it said, if you hear this pastime, you achieve great faith in Krishna. And the other aspect that's emphasized in that pastime is the importance of complete detachment or total surrender to the Lord. And so those are some characteristics of that direct devotional service that Lord Kapila is telling Devahuti to Mother Devahuti to practice. Um, and the last point I'll make is that Krishna actually takes personal intervention um, when 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 we approach the Lord. I'm going to read this last verse, and then we can end here. It says, "If one hears of the characteristics of Prithu Maharaj and as a Brahmana, and he becomes perfectly qualified with Brahminical powers. If he's a Kshatriya, he becomes a king of the world. If he's a Vaishya, he becomes a master of other Vaishyas and many animals. And if he's a Shudra, he becomes the topmost devotee." So again, it's stressed if just one hears the characteristics of devotees like Prithu Maharaj, um, he becomes perfectly qualified, right, with the Brahmanical powers. So those are the main points that I wanted to cover. A bit about what pure devotion service is, hearing the association of devotees, and thirdly, um, the aspect of hearing Shravanam. I'll pause here for if devotees have any comments or thoughts here, if they want to add anything.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you. Uh, the story is nice. I know you mentioned earlier in one of your classes that I'm reading Bhagavatam in Lord Shiva's temple. So, thank you. Uh,
Thank you.
you were
Sure.
talking about the first one, Prabhu. I mean, first topic that you mentioned, if I'm right. Uh,
The first topic was trying to sort of like understand what devotional service really means, um, and the fact that we have mixed consciousness,
yeah,
but
yeah,
the actual devotional service is actually pure, and like the
yeah.
process is us to get that. Yeah, yeah,
So the process is to get out of those mixed activities or mixed consciousness, right? So that's what you are referring.
yeah, exactly. Like the whole idea of practicing bhakti is to make our consciousness pure, and actually make us to want us to practice Krishna consciousness rather than just doing it for the sake of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because from Bhagavad Gita, the verse it says, "Yesam tvantavatam papam." I mean, unless one is completely free from all sinful activities,
Mm,
not practice bhakti.
yeah.
Uh, I mean, of course, this is a sadhana bhakti we are talking.
Yeah.
So other thing, Prabhu, I mean the Pruta Maharaj one, right? There's always the last one that you read. I mean, the translation is little not translation. I mean the translation when you read, it is little bewildering because for all the higher varnas, it says they will perfect in those varnas. For Sudra, it says he'll become a pure devotee.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
When I read this, the interesting point to me was that like I don't know if it's trying to depict the fact that like even if you're of the most you're of the lowest varnas, something like this is
Mm,
so powerful that you can like you can become the greatest devotee even if you're of the lowest varnas. That's how I had sort of interpreted that
mm,
the essence of that verse. Yeah.
mm. Okay.
But I agree. It's a little bit it is a little bit bewildering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akannam Prabhuji. Nice class. And the story, it's like really good. I could see that, yeah, the hearing from you is saying, Bhagavatam, how many ever times we hear, it's never boring. We feel like hear more and more. Thank you for reminder. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Very good.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you, devotees. If nothing else, we'll end here and hope you'll have a great Saturday. Good weekend. It's cold. Stay warm.